Sarah Martinez had always been a creature of habit. Every morning at exactly 7:15 a.m., she would walk past the small flower shop on Maple Street on her way to work. The elderly owner, Mr. Chen, would always smile and wave from behind the glass windows filled with colorful blooms. But it was the single white jasmine flower that appeared on her doorstep every Tuesday morning that truly puzzled her. The first time it happened, Sarah thought it was a mistake. Someone had probably mixed up addresses. She picked up the delicate flower, inhaled its sweet fragrance, and placed it in a small vase on her kitchen table. The flower was perfect, fresh with morning dew still clinging to its petals. She spent the entire day wondering who it could be from, checking with neighbors and even calling the local florist to see if they had made a delivery error. When the same thing happened the following Tuesday, Sarah began to feel a flutter of excitement mixed with curiosity. 2 weeks in a row couldn't be a coincidence. Someone was deliberately leaving these flowers for her. She started waking up earlier on Tuesdays, hoping to catch a glimpse of her mysterious admirer, but the flower always appeared sometime between midnight and dawn, long before she stirred from sleep. By the fourth Tuesday, Sarah had developed a routine around the flowers. She would carefully place each one in fresh water, arranging them in different spots around her small apartment. The jasmine flowers seemed to fill her home with hope and warmth. She found herself looking forward to Tuesdays with an anticipation she hadn't felt in years. Her friends at work noticed the change in her mood, commenting on how she seemed happier and more energetic. Sarah began keeping a small journal about the flowers, noting their condition, the exact time she discovered them, and any small details that might provide clues about their origin. She wrote about how each flower seemed perfectly chosen, always at the peak of freshness, always the same variety of white jasmine. The consistency suggested someone who knew flowers well, someone who cared about quality and timing. The mystery consumed her thoughts throughout the week. During lunch breaks, she found herself walking past different flower shops in town, studying the arrangements and watching the florists work. She learned that white jasmine symbolized pure love and good luck in many cultures. The knowledge made her heart race with possibilities. Was someone trying to tell her something? Was this a sign of romantic interest or simply a kind gesture from a secret friend? As weeks turned into months, the Tuesday flowers became the highlight of Sarah's week. She rearranged her schedule to ensure she was always home on Tuesday mornings. She even installed a small security light by her front door, hoping it might help her spot the delivery person, but it seemed to make no difference. Whoever was leaving the flowers was either very stealthy or had intimate knowledge of her schedule and habits. Sarah started paying more attention to the people in her daily life, wondering if any of them could be her secret admirer. There was David from the coffee shop who always remembered her order, or perhaps Marcus from her apartment building who held the elevator door for her every morning. She even considered whether it might be someone from her past trying to reconnect, though she couldn't think of anyone who would choose such an elaborate and patient approach. The flowers began to influence other aspects of her life. Sarah found herself dressing more carefully on Tuesday mornings, just in case she happened to encounter her mystery person. She started taking different routes to work, hoping to notice someone who might be watching her routine. She became more social, accepting invitations to neighborhood events and community gatherings, thinking she might discover her admirer among familiar faces. Friends and family offered various theories about the flowers. Her sister insisted it must be someone Sarah worked with, while her best friend was convinced it was a neighbor who had been quietly observing her for months. Her mother suggested it might be someone from her college days who had recently moved to town. Each theory seemed possible, yet none felt quite right. The anticipation of each Tuesday began to affect Sarah's sleep. She would lie awake on Monday nights wondering what the next morning would bring. Sometimes she considered staying up all night to finally solve the mystery, but exhaustion always won out. She tried setting her alarm for different early morning hours, but the flower always seemed to appear just before she checked, as if the person knew exactly when she would look. As autumn approached, Sarah realized the flowers had been appearing for nearly 6 months. The routine had become so natural that she couldn't imagine her life without it. The weekly gesture had brought unexpected joy and mystery to her otherwise predictable existence. She had grown attached not just to the flowers themselves, but to the thoughtfulness and consistency of the unknown person who continued to brighten her weeks. Yet beneath her happiness, a small worry was growing. What if the flowers stopped coming? What if she never discovered who was behind this beautiful mystery? The thought of losing this weekly connection to an unknown kindness made her realize how much the gesture had come to mean to her. She decided that soon she would need to take more active steps to solve the puzzle, even if it meant the end of the enchanting mystery that had become such a sweet part of her life. Sarah's determination to solve the mystery intensified as winter approached. The white jasmine flowers continued arriving every Tuesday without fail, even through the first frost and snow. This consistency made her realize that whoever was doing this had access to fresh jasmine year-round, which narrowed down the possibilities significantly. Not every flower shop carried jasmine during winter months, and certainly not flowers of this exceptional quality. She decided to conduct her own investigation. Sarah took a day off work and visited every flower shop within a 20-mile radius of her home. At each location, she asked about white jasmine availability, pricing, and whether they had any regular customers who purchased single stems weekly. Most shop owners were helpful, but couldn't provide information about specific customers due to privacy concerns. However, she did learn that only 3 shops in the area maintained fresh jasmine supplies throughout the winter. The first shop was downtown, too far from her neighborhood for someone to make regular early morning deliveries. The second was part of a large grocery chain that didn't specialize in premium flowers. But the third shop, Chen's Garden on Maple Street, was the same one she passed every morning on her way to work. The coincidence struck her immediately, and she felt her heart pound as she approached the familiar storefront. Mr. Chen greeted her with his usual warm smile as she entered the shop. The interior was filled with the fragrant aroma of various flowers, but she immediately spotted a display of white jasmine near the front window. When she asked about purchasing jasmine regularly, Mr. Chen's eyes sparkled with what seemed like recognition, though he maintained his professional demeanor. He explained that he special-ordered jasmine from a supplier who grew them in greenhouses, ensuring year-round availability for his most dedicated customers. Sarah tried to probe gently about who might be purchasing jasmine weekly, but Mr. Chen skillfully redirected the conversation to the care and meaning of different flowers. He did mention that jasmine was particularly popular among people who appreciated its symbolism of pure intentions and spiritual love. The way he spoke about the flowers made Sarah suspect he knew more than he was letting on, but she couldn't bring herself to ask directly. Leaving the shop with more questions than answers, Sarah decided to try a different approach. She began varying her Tuesday morning routine, sometimes leaving for work earlier or later than usual, hoping to disrupt the flower delivery timing. But somehow, the flowers always appeared when she wasn't watching. It was as if the person knew her schedule better than she knew it herself. Growing more curious, Sarah enlisted the help of her neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, an elderly woman who spent most of her day looking out her front window. Mrs. Patterson was delighted to be part of the mystery and promised to keep watch on Tuesday mornings. However, when Sarah asked her about it the following week, Mrs. Patterson claimed she had dozed off and missed seeing anything unusual. The pattern repeated with other neighbors Sarah approached for help. Everyone seemed willing to assist, but somehow no one ever saw the flower delivery happening. Sarah began to wonder if there was something more coordinated about this than she had initially thought. Could multiple people be involved in maintaining her mystery? She tried installing a small, discreet camera near her front door, but discovered it had mysteriously malfunctioned the following Tuesday morning. The camera worked perfectly every other day of the week, which seemed beyond coincidental. Someone clearly didn't want to be recorded, and they had the knowledge and opportunity to interfere with her surveillance attempts. Sarah's investigation took on a more systematic approach. She created a timeline of everyone she interacted with regularly, mapping out who had access to her schedule and address. She noted that the flowers had started appearing shortly after she had moved to the neighborhood, which might mean the person was someone she had met recently, rather than an old acquaintance. Her coworker Jennifer suggested they conduct a stakeout, and one Tuesday morning they positioned themselves in Jennifer's car across the street from Sarah's apartment building at 5 a.m. They waited with coffee and snacks, determined to finally catch the mystery person in the act. Hours passed without any sign of unusual activity. When Sarah finally went to check her doorstep at 8 a.m., the flower was there as always, despite their vigilant watch. The failed stakeout left Sarah feeling more puzzled than ever. How was it possible for someone to deliver a flower to her doorstep without being seen by two people, specifically watching for them? The logical explanations were becoming fewer and more far-fetched. She began to consider whether someone in her building might be involved, someone with access to the interior hallways who could approach her door from inside the building. Sarah started paying closer attention to her fellow residents. There was quiet Mr. Thompson, who worked night shifts and might be awake during the early morning hours. Mrs. Garcia, the building manager, had keys to everywhere and knew everyone's routines. Young Peter from the third floor was studying botany at the local college and certainly knew about flowers. Each person seemed like a possible candidate, yet none felt like the right answer. The mystery began affecting Sarah's relationships with her neighbors. She found herself analyzing every interaction, looking for signs that someone might be hiding knowledge about the flowers. Her natural friendliness became guarded as she tried to detect any hints or slip-ups in conversations. She worried that her investigation was making her paranoid and changing her into someone she didn't like. During one particularly frustrating week, Sarah considered simply staying awake all night on Monday to definitively catch the delivery person. She prepared with extra coffee and engaging books, determined to finally solve the puzzle. But as the hours passed, she found her resolve weakening. Part of her wondered whether she really wanted to end the mystery. The weekly flowers had brought such unexpected joy to her life, and knowing the truth might somehow diminish their magic. As she sat in her living room at 3 a.m., surrounded by months of carefully preserved jasmine flowers, Sarah realized that the investigation had become almost as important to her as the flowers themselves. The mystery had given her a sense of purpose and excitement that she had been missing. She began to question whether solving it was worth potentially losing the wonder, an anticipation that had brightened her entire year. Spring arrived with an unusual development that would change everything Sarah thought she knew about her weekly flowers. While cleaning out her mailbox one Thursday afternoon, she discovered a small, folded piece of paper tucked behind a stack of bills. The paper was cream-colored and felt expensive to the touch. When she unfolded it, she found a handwritten message in elegant script. "The jasmine blooms for those who understand patience and kindness. Your gentle spirit has not gone unnoticed." Sarah's hands trembled as she read the note several times. This was the first direct communication from her mystery person in nearly 8 months of flower deliveries. The handwriting was careful and deliberate, suggesting someone older or at least someone who had learned penmanship in a different era. The paper smelled faintly of the same sweet fragrance that accompanied the jasmine flowers, confirming that this message was definitely connected to her Tuesday deliveries. She rushed upstairs to her apartment and examined the note under better lighting. The ink appeared to be from a fountain pen, and there were no smudges or corrections indicating the writer had composed the message carefully before writing it down. The phrase "gentle spirit" puzzled her. When had someone observed her being particularly gentle or kind? Sarah tried to recall recent acts of kindness, wondering if someone had witnessed her helping Mrs. Patterson with groceries or her weekly volunteer work at the animal shelter. The next day, Sarah visited the animal shelter with renewed attention to her surroundings. She had been volunteering there every Saturday for over 2 years, mainly helping with the cats who needed extra socialization. The shelter was run by a dedicated team of mostly older volunteers, and Sarah wondered if one of them might be behind the flowers. She observed everyone more carefully during her shift, looking for signs of recognition or special attention. During her lunch break at the shelter, Sarah struck up a conversation with Eleanor, a longtime volunteer who seemed to know everyone in the community. When Sarah mentioned the mystery flowers in general terms, Eleanor's eyes lit up with interest. She shared that gestures like that often came from people who had been touched by someone's kindness, but felt too shy or humble to acknowledge it directly. Eleanor's words made Sarah think about all the small interactions she had throughout her week, moments she might not even remember that could have meant something significant to another person. That evening, Sarah decided to write her own note in response. She crafted several drafts before settling on, "Your thoughtfulness has brought unexpected joy to my life. I would welcome the chance to thank you personally." She placed the note in a small envelope and left it on her doorstep Tuesday morning, before the usual flower delivery time, hoping her mystery person would find it. The following Tuesday, Sarah discovered not only her usual jasmine flower, but also her note, returned unopened with a gentle response written on the envelope. Some gifts are meant to remain anonymous. The joy is in the giving, not the acknowledgement. The handwriting matched the previous note exactly, and Sarah felt both disappointed and oddly respected by the response. This person clearly valued privacy and the pure act of giving without recognition. Sarah began paying attention to different aspects of her daily routine, wondering when someone might be observing her gentle spirit. She noticed that she naturally held doors for people, helped elderly neighbors with heavy packages, and always spoke kindly to service workers and cashiers. These had become such automatic behaviors that she barely thought about them, but perhaps someone had been watching and appreciating these small courtesies. Her investigation took a new direction when she realized the timing of the flowers might be significant beyond just avoiding detection. The flowers always appeared early Tuesday morning, which meant they were left on Monday night or very early Tuesday. Sarah began thinking about who in her life might have Monday evening availability and access to fresh flowers at unusual hours. Breakthrough came during a casual conversation with David, the barista at her regular coffee shop. While discussing local businesses, he mentioned that Mr. Chen from the flower shop often worked late on Monday evenings, preparing special orders for Tuesday delivery. David's comment was innocent enough, but it sparked a new theory in Sarah's mind. What if Mr. Chen wasn't just the supplier of the flowers, but actually the person delivering them? The possibility seemed both logical and surprising. Mr. Chen had the access to fresh jasmine, the knowledge of flower care, and he saw her every morning on her walk to work. He would know her schedule and her address from observing her routine. The elderly florist had always been kind to her, but she had never considered him as anything more than a friendly shopkeeper. Could his daily waves and smiles have been more meaningful than casual politeness? Sarah decided to test her theory by changing her morning routine for a week. Instead of walking past the flower shop, she took a different route to work. She was curious to see if Mr. Chen would notice her absence and whether it might affect the flower deliveries. The first few days of her new route felt strange after months of the familiar morning greeting, but she was determined to gather more information. Finally, Tuesday arrived. Sarah found her usual jasmine flower waiting on the doorstep, exactly as always. This seemed to contradict her theory about Mr. Chen, since he wouldn't have seen her all week and wouldn't know if her schedule had changed. Unless, of course, he had other ways of monitoring whether she was home and following her regular routine. The following week, Sarah resumed her usual walking route but paid much closer attention to Mr. Chen's behavior. When she passed the flower shop on Tuesday morning, she noticed him watching through the window with what seemed like particular interest. Their usual exchange of waves felt different somehow, as if there was an unspoken understanding between them. She found herself wondering if the elderly florist's kind eyes held secrets she had never noticed before. Sarah's growing suspicion about Mr. Chen was complicated by her genuine fondness for the old man. If he was indeed behind the flowers, his motivation remained unclear. Was this romantic interest, paternal affection, or simply the kindness of someone who had lived long enough to appreciate the value of small gestures? The uncertainty made her both eager to confirm her theory and hesitant to potentially change a relationship that had become important to her daily life. That weekend, Sarah made a decision that would bring her closer to the truth than she had ever imagined possible. She would visit Chen's garden on Monday evening, ostensibly to purchase flowers for her own apartment, but really to observe the shop's late-night activities and perhaps catch a glimpse of the Tuesday morning preparations that David had mentioned. Monday evening arrived with Sarah feeling nervous about her planned visit to Chen's garden. She had spent the day rehearsing casual reasons for needing flowers so late, but as she approached the shop around 7 p.m., she discovered it was already closed. The lights were off and a closed sign hung in the front window. Disappointed but not discouraged, Sarah decided to walk around the building to see if there were any signs of activity in the back areas where Mr. Chen might prepare special orders. As she rounded the corner into the narrow alley behind the shop, Sarah was surprised to see warm light glowing from a small window near the back door. She could hear the soft sound of classical music playing inside. Moving closer, she noticed the sweet fragrance of jasmine flowers drifting from the building. Her heart began to race as she realized she might be witnessing the preparation of her Tuesday morning flower. Through the partially frosted window, Sarah could make out a figure moving around inside what appeared to be a workshop area. The person seemed to be working with flowers, arranging them with careful, deliberate movements. She strained to see more clearly, but the glass made it impossible to identify who was inside. The scene looked peaceful and methodical. Exactly what she imagined flower preparation might look like. Suddenly, the back door opened and Sarah found herself face to face with someone completely unexpected. It wasn't Mr. Chen at all, but a woman around her own age with kind eyes and flower-dusted hands. The woman looked as startled as Sarah felt, and for a moment they both stood frozen in the doorway. The stranger was holding a single white jasmine flower, and Sarah's breath caught in her throat as the pieces began falling into place. "I'm sorry," Sarah stammered, feeling embarrassed about being caught lurking outside the shop. "I was looking for Mr. Chen. I wanted to buy some flowers, but the shop seemed closed." The woman smiled gently and introduced herself as Linda Chen, Mr. Chen's daughter. She explained that she often helped her father with special orders and evening preparations, especially for customers who had become important to the family business. Linda invited Sarah inside, and as they entered the workshop area, Sarah saw dozens of jasmine plants growing under special lights. The setup was more elaborate than she had expected, with different varieties of jasmine in various stages of bloom. Linda explained that her father was passionate about maintaining year-round jasmine availability, especially since several regular customers depended on consistent weekly deliveries. As they talked, Sarah felt compelled to mention her mystery flowers, describing them in general terms without revealing her address or specific details. Linda listened with growing interest, and Sarah noticed a knowing look in her eyes. When Sarah finished describing the weekly deliveries, Linda was quiet for a long moment, as if deciding whether to share something important. "Those flowers," Linda finally said, "they're not from a secret admirer or mysterious stranger. They're from someone who has been watching you make a difference in people's lives. Someone who believes kindness should be acknowledged, even when the kind person doesn't realize the impact they're having." Her words sent chills down Sarah's spine as she realized this conversation was about to reveal the truth she had been seeking for months. Linda led Sarah to a small office area behind the workshop, where the walls were covered with thank you cards, photos, and letters from customers over the years. In the center of one bulletin board was a section dedicated to what Linda called kindness projects. Special flower deliveries the family made to recognize people who had made positive impacts in the community without seeking recognition. Pointing to a folder labeled with Sarah's street address, Linda explained that the weekly jasmine deliveries had been requested and paid for in advance by someone who had observed Sarah's consistent kindness and wanted to ensure she received recognition for her gentle spirit. The identity of the person who had initiated the flower deliveries was kept confidential, even from Linda, as part of their policy for kindness projects. Sarah felt a mix of emotions as Linda revealed more details. The flowers had been arranged through an anonymous donor who had visited the shop several months earlier, with specific instructions about timing, flower type, and duration of deliveries. The person had paid for an entire year of weekly flowers, and had specifically requested white jasmine because of its symbolism of pure, selfless love and spiritual beauty. But who could it be? Sarah asked, feeling both grateful and frustrated that the mystery was only partially solved. Linda showed her the original order form, but the name section was blank, and the payment had been made in cash. The only clue was a note attached to the order that read, "For the young woman who helps others without counting the cost to herself." Linda revealed that the anonymous donor had also left instructions for what to do if Sarah ever came looking for answers about the flowers. In a sealed envelope marked "Open if she asks," Linda found additional instructions that she was now authorized to share. The donor had anticipated that Sarah might eventually investigate the flowers and had left a message specifically for that possibility. Reading from the note, Linda shared the donor's words. Sarah's kindness extends far beyond what she realizes. She helps elderly neighbors, volunteers consistently at the animal shelter, treats service workers with genuine respect, and performs dozens of small acts of consideration every week. She deserves to know that her goodness has been noticed and appreciated, even if she never learns who noticed it. The revelation made Sarah emotional, as she realized someone had been observing her life closely enough to document her various acts of kindness. She felt both touched and slightly unsettled by the level of attention someone had been paying to her daily activities. Linda assured her that the donor's intention seemed purely positive, focused on recognizing goodness rather than any inappropriate surveillance. Linda offered to contact the anonymous donor to let them know Sarah had discovered the truth about the flowers, but Sarah found herself hesitating. Part of her wanted to solve the complete mystery and thank her benefactor personally, but another part appreciated the pure intention behind maintaining anonymity. The fact that someone had gone to such elaborate lengths to ensure her kindness was acknowledged without seeking recognition for themselves was profoundly moving. As Sarah prepared to leave the flower shop, Linda handed her the original jasmine flower that she had been preparing when Sarah arrived. "This was going to be tomorrow's delivery," she explained with a smile, "but since you're here, you might as well take it now." Sarah accepted the flower with new appreciation, understanding that it represented not just a beautiful gesture, but someone's deep recognition of her character and actions. Walking home with the jasmine flower, Sarah reflected on how the partial revelation had changed her understanding of the mystery. She no longer saw the flowers as romantic gestures or random acts of kindness, but as evidence that her efforts to be a good person had been noticed and valued by someone in her community. The knowledge filled her with both humility and determination to continue living up to the recognition she had unknowingly received. The weeks following Sarah's visit to Chen's garden brought a new perspective to her Tuesday morning flowers. Knowing they represented recognition of her kindness rather than romantic interest changed how she felt about receiving them. She found herself more conscious of her daily actions, not because she wanted to earn more flowers, but because she realized how much her small gestures apparently meant to others. Sarah decided to write a letter to her anonymous benefactor, even though she didn't know how to deliver it. She crafted a heartfelt message expressing her gratitude and explaining how the flowers had brought unexpected joy to her life. She gave the sealed letter to Linda at the flower shop, hoping it might somehow reach the person who had shown her such thoughtful recognition. 2 weeks later, Sarah received an unexpected phone call at work. The caller identified himself as Robert Patterson, and the name sounded familiar, though she couldn't immediately place it. Robert explained that he was Mrs. Patterson's son, and that he had something important to discuss with Sarah in person. He asked if they could meet at a coffee shop near her apartment that evening, and something in his tone suggested this meeting would be significant. Sarah spent the afternoon trying to remember everything she knew about Mrs. Patterson's family. Her elderly neighbor had mentioned having a son who lived in another state and worked as a teacher, but Sarah had never met him or thought much about Mrs. Patterson's family beyond their casual hallway conversations. She couldn't imagine what Robert might want to discuss with her, but she agreed to the meeting out of curiosity and respect for his mother. When Sarah arrived at the coffee shop, she immediately recognized Robert from family photos she had seen in Mrs. Patterson's apartment during their occasional visits. He was a man in his 50s with kind eyes and graying hair, and he stood up nervously when she approached his table. As they sat down together, Robert seemed to struggle with how to begin the conversation, fidgeting with his coffee cup and avoiding direct eye contact. "Sarah," he finally began, "I need to tell you something that might surprise you. I'm the person who has been arranging for the jasmine flowers to be delivered to your apartment every Tuesday." The words hit Sarah like a gentle shock. She had imagined many possibilities for her anonymous benefactor, but Mrs. Patterson's son had never occurred to her, especially since he lived several states away. Robert went on to explain that his mother had been telling him stories about Sarah's kindness for over a year. Mrs. Patterson had shared detailed accounts of how Sarah helped her with groceries, checked on her during bad weather, and always took time to chat in the hallways even when she seemed rushed. His mother had been particularly moved by Sarah's consistent offers to help without being asked, and her genuine interest in Mrs. Patterson's well-being. "My mother is proud and independent," Robert continued, "but she's also been alone since my father died 3 years ago. Your friendship and kindness have meant more to her than you could possibly know. She talks about you in every phone call we have, always with such warmth and gratitude." Sarah felt tears welling up in her eyes as she realized how much her simple, neighborly actions had impacted the elderly woman she had grown fond of. Robert explained that he had been visiting his mother regularly, staying in a nearby hotel to help her with various needs and appointments. During these visits, he had witnessed firsthand the positive effect Sarah's presence had on his mother's daily life. Mrs. Patterson would light up when talking about their conversations, and she clearly looked forward to their interactions as highlights of her week. The decision to arrange the flower deliveries had come after Robert noticed how much joy Sarah seemed to bring to everyone around her. During his visits, he had observed her interactions with other neighbors, her patience with delivery personnel, and her consistent willingness to help anyone who needed assistance. He had been particularly impressed by her work at the animal shelter, which his mother had mentioned proudly as if Sarah were her own daughter. "I wanted to do something to recognize your character," Robert said, "but I didn't want you to feel obligated to my mother, or to change your natural behavior because you knew someone was watching." The anonymous flowers seemed like a way to acknowledge your goodness without creating any awkward social obligations. Sarah was deeply moved by his thoughtfulness and the lengths he had gone to maintain the mystery while ensuring her kindness was recognized. Robert revealed that he had been coordinating the flower deliveries during his monthly visits to see his mother. He would drive to Chen's garden on Monday evenings, select the perfect jasmine flower, and then leave it on Sarah's doorstep very early Tuesday morning before driving back to his hotel. The timing had been carefully planned to avoid disrupting anyone's routine, while ensuring the flowers were fresh and properly cared for. The revelation explained many of the mysteries Sarah had encountered during her investigation. Robert's presence in the building during his visits would have gone unnoticed by other neighbors who knew him as Mrs. Patterson's son. His familiarity with the building layout and Sarah's schedule came from his regular stays and his mother's detailed knowledge of the daily routines of their neighbors. Sarah learned that Mrs. Patterson had been aware of the flower deliveries from the beginning, though she had promised her son to keep the secret. This explained why Mrs. Patterson had never successfully helped with Sarah's surveillance attempts, and why she always seemed to know more than she was sharing about the mystery. The elderly woman had been protecting both her son's privacy and the pure intention behind his gesture. "Mom felt terrible about not helping you solve the mystery," Robert admitted with a smile. "But she also understood why the flowers needed to remain anonymous. She said you deserved the recognition, but that knowing the source might make you feel obligated to act differently around our family." Sarah realized that both mother and son had shown remarkable consideration for her feelings and her natural way of being kind. As their conversation continued, Robert shared specific stories his mother had told him about Sarah's kindness. There was the time Sarah had noticed Mrs. Patterson struggling with her keys and had spent 20 minutes helping her find the right one. Another time, Sarah had brought soup when she heard Mrs. Patterson coughing in the hallway. These moments, which Sarah barely remembered, had been significant enough for Mrs. Patterson to share with her son as examples of the wonderful neighbor she had been blessed to know. Robert's final revelation touched Sarah most deeply. He explained that the year-long flower arrangement was coming to an end in 2 more months, but that his mother had asked him to continue the gesture indefinitely. Mrs. Patterson had told her son that Sarah's presence in her life had become so important that she wanted to ensure Sarah always knew how much she was appreciated, even if she couldn't express it directly. Sitting in the coffee shop with Robert, Sarah felt overwhelmed by the depth of love and appreciation that had motivated the mysterious flower deliveries. What had started as a puzzling weekly surprise had revealed itself to be the result of genuine gratitude from people whose lives she had touched through simple, everyday kindness. The truth behind the flowers was more beautiful than any romantic mystery could have been. The revelation about Robert and Mrs. Patterson transformed Sarah's understanding of community, kindness, and the ripple effects of simple human decency. Walking home from the coffee shop that evening, she felt a profound shift in how she saw her daily interactions. Every smile, every held door, every moment of patience with a struggling cashier now carried new weight, as she realized these actions were being noticed and valued by people around her. The next morning, Sarah's encounter with Mrs. Patterson in the hallway was completely different. When the elderly woman greeted her with her usual warm smile, Sarah saw years of genuine affection and gratitude behind those kind eyes. She understood now why Mrs. Patterson always seemed so interested in her life and so eager to chat, even when Sarah was obviously in a hurry. The older woman wasn't just being neighborly, she was cherishing time with someone who had brought unexpected light into her life. Sarah found herself looking at Mrs. Patterson with new appreciation. The elderly woman had lost her husband, lived alone, and probably had many days that felt lonely or difficult. Yet she had raised a son thoughtful enough to recognize kindness in others and creative enough to find a way to honor it without expectation of return. The family's character spoke volumes about the values they shared and the love they had for each other. When Tuesday arrived, Sarah approached her doorstep with completely new feelings about finding the weekly jasmine flower. As she picked up the delicate bloom, she thought about Robert driving hours to visit his mother, selecting the perfect flower and carefully placing it where she would find it. The gesture no longer seemed mysterious or romantic. It felt like a bridge between generations, connecting her kindness to Mrs. Patterson with Robert's desire to honor that kindness. Sarah decided to write individual thank you letters to both Robert and Mrs. Patterson. To Robert, she expressed her amazement at his thoughtfulness and creativity in finding such a beautiful way to acknowledge kindness without creating obligation. She thanked him for the months of joy and mystery the flowers had brought to her life, and she assured him that knowing the truth made the gesture even more meaningful than when it was anonymous. Her letter to Mrs. Patterson was more personal and emotional. Sarah wrote about how much their friendship meant to her and how she had never realized the impact of their simple interactions. She explained that helping neighbors and being kind to others felt natural to her, not like something deserving special recognition, but that knowing it mattered to Mrs. Patterson made her want to be even more intentional about spreading kindness in the world. The response from Mrs. Patterson came in the form of a handwritten note slipped under Sarah's door the following day. The elderly woman's careful script expressed years of gratitude for Sarah's consistent friendship and kindness. She wrote about how Sarah's presence in the building had made her feel less alone and more connected to a community that cared about its members. Mrs. Patterson's note revealed that she had been widowed for 3 years and had struggled with feelings of invisibility that often accompany aging. Sarah's natural warmth and genuine interest in her well-being had restored her sense of being valued and remembered. The elderly woman wrote that watching Sarah treat everyone with kindness had renewed her faith in human goodness and reminded her of the importance of small gestures in creating meaningful connections. Over the following weeks, Sarah's relationship with the Patterson family deepened in beautiful ways. Robert began timing his visits to coincide with Sarah's schedule, and the three of them started sharing occasional dinners together. These gatherings were filled with stories, laughter, and the kind of intergenerational friendship that enriches everyone involved. Sarah learned about Mrs. Patterson's decades as a school librarian and Robert's work teaching middle school history in another state. The weekly flower deliveries continued, but now they carried even deeper meaning. Each Tuesday morning, Sarah would find her jasmine flower and think about the love between a mother and son that had created this tradition. She began pressing some of the flowers in a special journal, where she recorded acts of kindness she witnessed or participated in throughout her community. Sarah's awareness of how much small gestures mattered inspired her to be more intentional about spreading kindness. She started leaving encouraging notes for her postal carrier, bringing coffee to the security guard at her office building, and volunteering for additional shifts at the animal shelter. These actions felt natural extensions of who she had always been, but now she did them with fuller appreciation for their potential impact. The story of the mysterious flowers became a favorite tale that Sarah shared with friends and family. People were consistently moved by the thoughtfulness of Robert's gesture and the depth of appreciation Mrs. Patterson felt for simple neighborly kindness. The story inspired several of Sarah's friends to pay closer attention to opportunities for acknowledging goodness in their own communities. 6 months after learning the truth about the flowers, Sarah received news that would test everything she had learned about the importance of human connections. Mrs. Patterson was diagnosed with a serious illness that would require extensive treatment and likely a move to be closer to Robert's family. The elderly woman was facing the prospect of leaving the apartment building that had been her home for over 15 years. Sarah immediately stepped up to help with the transition, but her assistance went far beyond practical support. She coordinated with other neighbors to create a memory book filled with photos and stories from Mrs. Patterson's years in the building. She organized a farewell gathering that brought together dozens of people whose lives had been touched by the kind woman's presence over the years. During Mrs. Patterson's final week in the apartment, she and Sarah spent hours talking about life, kindness, and the unexpected ways people can impact each other. Mrs. Patterson shared wisdom gained from decades of observing human nature, while Sarah expressed how much the flower mystery had taught her about the far-reaching effects of simple goodness. On Mrs. Patterson's last Tuesday in the building, Sarah found something different on her doorstep. Instead of a single jasmine flower, there was a small potted jasmine plant with a note attached. The message, written in Robert's handwriting, read, "Some traditions are meant to continue growing. Thank you for showing us that kindness multiplies when it's shared." The jasmine plant became a symbol of everything Sarah had learned from the mysterious flower deliveries. She placed it in a sunny spot in her apartment where she could see it every morning, and she began sharing cuttings with neighbors and friends. Each new plant carried the story of how recognition and gratitude had grown from a simple observation of everyday kindness. As the seasons changed and Sarah tended to her growing collection of jasmine plants, she reflected on how a year of mysterious flower deliveries had transformed her understanding of community and connection. The experience had taught her that kindness creates invisible networks of appreciation and love, that small gestures can have profound impacts, and that the most beautiful mysteries in life often reveal truths about human goodness that restore faith in the power of caring for one another. Sarah continued her weekly routine of walking past Chen's garden, but now she stopped in regularly to visit with Linda and Mr. Chen. She had become part of their extended flower shop family, and she occasionally helped with their community kindness projects, paying forward the recognition and joy that had been so generously given to her through months of mysterious Tuesday morning surprises. The truth behind the flowers had been more beautiful than any romantic mystery could have been, because it revealed the depth of human capacity for gratitude, the importance of intergenerational friendship, and the way simple kindness can create lasting bonds that enrich entire communities. Sarah's gentle spirit had been noticed, appreciated, and honored in a way that changed not only her own life, but the lives of everyone who heard the story of how love grows when kindness is recognized and celebrated.